How you doing, guys? It's your boy, and I recently passed 1,000 miles with my Aniioki AQ177 Pro Max long-range electric bike. Well, actually, it's closer to 1,200 miles as of the recording of this video, but anyway, better late to the party than never. So in today's video, I'm going to let you guys know how everything's been going with my Aniioki bike, and maybe we'll talk about some other stuff. So if that sounds like a plan, Peter Pan, then hit that hype button, and we're off to Neverland. Since I prefer to end things on a more uplifting note, I'm actually going to start off with the cons. And the first con that I think most people can agree with is this bike lacks a USB port. I can look at the lack of a USB port in one of two ways. The first one, which doesn't seem very likely, is that they probably overlooked putting a USB port on this bike. And the second one, which I think is more likely, is the fact that they had this other product. It's called a power inverter. So for anyone that doesn't know, it's a device that's supposed to turn the bike itself into a power source for other electronics, like small appliances, chargers, anything like that. The problem I have with that is that it costs like $400 USD. And I think that's out of most people's price range. I mean, you figure they're already making a pretty big commitment / investment into a bike like this, costing over $1,000. So then to have to spend another $400 on a device that then allows you to use a USB port or some other things that are pretty niche in the grand scheme of things. I don't know. I'm just not too fond of that. Now, don't get me wrong. I do think that power inverter is pretty useful. I don't have one myself, but I imagine that you could take it while you're traveling, you want to go camping, or maybe you run out of power from a rainstorm or a hurricane. So you just need to power on some fans or just a basic use of a USB cable. You know, I can see in scenarios like that being useful. Still, despite how useful it could be, it's quite niche in the grand scheme of things, and I think it would have been better if they just put a USB port on this bike. The next con that I have for this bike is not just a con towards the bike itself, but is also a qualm about the company, and that would be the quality control. For a more general look about the quality control of Aniioki, I recommend this video from Scott Hardesty. I saw this video a little while ago. It was sometime after I purchased my Aniioki bike, but essentially he was criticizing the quality control of the company because of his multiple bad experiences with their products, whether it be about the usage of cheap parts or the fact that a lot of things get past quality control with the bikes, and highlighting a lot of anecdotes that he's received about similar experiences with the company. You can check that time card here. While I haven't had any issues with this bike, I do keep in mind the fact that a lot of people seemingly do. And they do seem pretty polarizing when it comes to their quality control. And I do understand some points that other individuals have made. The fact that, you know, they're a very large company, they mass produce. So some things are going to fly under the radar, unfortunately. And it does seem like Aniioki has good customer service. I know I had good experience with them, and that seems to be the general consensus from what I've seen. And they seem to take feedback quite well on top of that. So hopefully they keep all that in mind and use that as a learning opportunity to improve their quality control. And speaking of quality control, I do have a nitpick about how this bike was built. In particular, it has to do with the headlamp. So the headlamp itself is pretty decent, but they put it on like this cheap metal bracket that you just bolt down on the front fork. And it is so wobbly. In fact, it's so wobbly that it almost creates a strobe light effect. And that can be pretty disorienting to some people. It's the only bike I've ever purchased that has that wobbly effect with the light. So that's definitely something that they could change moving forward. I've had people in my comment section give me a heads up about the motor controller, the wiring system for that, how it'll probably burn out. I haven't had any issues with those things so far, but I'll keep you guys posted if anything changes. And before I get into the positives, I do have a couple more cons that might not necessarily apply to me, but can apply to someone else. So first and foremost, this is a heavy bike. I mean, if you struggle to pick up anything with significant weight, you're gonna have a hard time picking up this bike, especially if you have to transport it somewhere. Like if you have a bike rack on the back of your car, or you need something that you can just shove in the trunk. I mean, right out the box, this bike weighs, think about 112 pounds, something like that. So she's heavy, she's thick. And when it comes to transporting this bike, if you have to throw it in the trunk, it's not foldable, so that's also another limitation. And this particular model that I have does not prioritize power or speed. I mean, you can get adequate speed and power from this bike, but only just. If you must go 35 plus miles an hour, for example, then yeah, this bike's not going to work for you either. However, this company does have different models, and they do have different variations of this model. So if you need to prioritize power and speed, then they got you covered in those other criteria. But for this specific model that I have, if you must go 35 plus miles an hour, I wouldn't recommend it. So essentially, if you need a lightweight bike that has a ton of power and top speed, this wouldn't be your first pick. Now that we went over the cons, it's time to go over the pros. And the first big pro, and probably the number one reason why you would even get this bike at all, or a similar bike like it, is the range. And yeah, I mean, this bike has a huge battery. It's a 48 volt, 60 amp hour. You're gonna get some big numbers of range for sure. And I've even done testing myself. When I did the review video for this bike, I went 31 miles and it only drained the battery by 31%, give or take, at least based on the voltage chart that I looked at. Now, I'm not completely sold on that chart that I had, because it seems like there's conflicting information with the voltage charts. I'm not exactly sure which one to follow, but if that chart is correct, and based on how I was riding the bike with the settings, the top speed and everything, then that translates to at least 100 miles right there. However, I do plan on making a dedicated range test just to see how far I can realistically go on a single charge with this battery. If that sounds interesting to you, then hit that like button. Don't forget to ring that Taco Bell so you get notified when I put it out. Okay, so I was having problems with my GoPro Hero 11 again, so I couldn't film with that for the rest of this video. And my GoPro Max 2 also ran out of battery, so I wasn't able to keep shooting with it. So I'm just going to finish the rest of this video at the house, and I'll be sure to go out some other day so I can get some decent B-roll to just put in the video. That way you're not just seeing this boring screen for the rest of what we're going to talk about in the video. But anyway, the next big pro to this bike is the suspension. So as I covered in the bike review video, you can check the time card here after this one, is that it's got a front fork, and I think it has 80 millimeters of travel, so it's pretty responsive. And then you get a suspension seat post with a huge plush cruiser saddle. And then you've got the rear suspension, which has a coil spring on both sides. And I actually like where they have the placement for it. It's just below the rear rack, which is usually how I load up my bike with a bunch of groceries, because as you guys know by now, I do delivery work on my electric bike. So you figure if I'm going to be off for hours and hours at a time, I want to make sure I'm riding in comfort. And to go alongside the huge range with that massive battery means that I can go further, and in comfort, and in style. And as we established in the bike review video, it's also got a good payload capacity. I think it's at least 400 pounds, something like that. And in practice, I had a fully loaded cargo trailer with a bunch of case packs of water. I even had to go up some hilly spots to deliver to the customer, and the bike handled it just fine. I know I did mention that this bike leaves something to be desired when it comes to its power and top speed, but for me, it's enough. I figure if I'm able to hit anywhere between 25 to 30 miles an hour on my bike, it's usually enough to get the job done. And I don't live in an area that's particularly hilly, save for a few spots. And those few spots, the bike is able to get up just fine. The next thing worth mentioning are some of the components on the bike. So in particular, I like the turn signals a lot. I think that's a very handy feature, because not only do you get them on the back of the bike, where they're pretty bright, especially when it's darker outside, but you also get the turn signals from the front. So that's informing the people in front of me, like if I'm at an intersection or if I got pedestrians coming my way, that I'm going to make a turn. So I find that very useful. It also has hazard lights, so if for any reason I need to put the hazard lights on, like, I don't know, maybe if I have to use like a middle turning lane, or if I have to park somewhere just to show a sense of urgency when I'm doing my deliveries, that's very handy as well. I got to give a special mention to the hydraulic brakes. So there's two of them. There's one on the front, one on the back. Very responsive. I've had no trouble with the braking power whatsoever. I also regularly load it up with a bunch of groceries. I have no trouble with that whatsoever. I can still go reasonably fast, get that nice squishy response from the suspension, and do what I gotta do. It's also pretty nimble, especially for a bike of its weight. I think a part of that has to do with the front fork. It doesn't have a dual crown fork like a lot of other similar bikes, but I actually think that's an advantage when it comes to being able to make tighter turns. And for what it's worth, it's also a pretty good looking bike too. In summary, I've had an overall positive experience with this bike so far. I've had a couple nitpicks and I've had a couple qualms, mainly the fact there's a lack of a USB port. I do work around that with portable power banks, but I would still really appreciate that they had a USB port. Maybe that's something they could consider for the future. And I do also keep in mind the quality control concern that was brought up by Scott Hardesty and other concerns that people have had with their general experiences with Aniioki. I'd also like to see a better mounting system for that headlamp, because a flimsy piece of metal, that's just not doing it for me. And if I happen to run into any issues of my own, I'll contact Aniioki and I'll keep you guys posted. However, on the flip side, I haven't had any major issues with this bike, and there's definitely a lot to appreciate about it. I know I mentioned it's not the most powerful bike, it's not the fastest thing in the world, unless you get a different variation or just a different model altogether. But for me, it gets the job done, right? It can hit 30 miles an hour, it can climb uphill, it's got a good payload. Acceleration is enough, so it does the job for me. But even more importantly than that, it can go far because of its massive battery, and its range claims do seem to be accurate for the most part. And it's got that full suspension, so I'm riding in comfort, riding in style. It's powerful enough, it's fast enough, all for a pretty decent price. And on that note, with how everything has gone so far, and taking everything into consideration, I'm going to give Aniioki's AQ177 Pro Max Long Range Electric Bike 2 thumbs up. And that's a wrap on today's video. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section down below. But if you enjoyed the video, give it a lick, subscribe to the channel, ring that taco bell so you get notified the next time I upload. If you want to show super support for your boy, you can visit my Patreon or get a YouTube channel membership, both of which just $1 a month. But anyway, love you guys, appreciate the continued support of my channel. I'll see you around. Take care.